Hi, this video is about subtracting whole numbers. So, first things, we always start in the top right hand corner when we're subtracting using an algorithm. And it's really important to check what type of question you're doing. So make sure that it's not an addition, it's not a multiply. Make sure that if you're subtracting, that you're supposed to be subtracting. All right, question number 1. 494 subtract 273. So again, top right hand corner, I start with 4 and I take 3 away. 4 subtract 3 equals 1. Move over to the tens column. 90, because that's a 9 in the tens column. That's its digit value. 90, take away 7, or 90, take away 70, equals 20. And 400, take away 200, equals 200. Top right hand corner, if I start with 4 and I take away 3, I'm left with 1. If I start with 9 and I take away 7, I'm left with 2. If I start with 4 and I take away 2, I'm left with 1. Oh, beg your pardon, I'm left with 2. Question number 2. 857 take away 231. 7 take away 1 leaves me with 6. Move over to the tens column. 5 take away 3 equals 2. 800 take away 200 equals 600. 626. Notice that my numbers are still really straight. We don't want to mix up our place value columns. Okay, because if that 6 is in this position, we know that digit value means it's worth 60. So there's a big difference between it worth 60 and say 6, for example. So keep it nice and straight. Now, this is where it gets tricky because question 1 and question 2 don't have any borrowing. And I can show you what that means. So no borrowing. What I want you to do is have a look at these numbers on top. They are bigger than the number underneath. I'll give you an example. The 4 is larger than the 2. The 9 is larger than the 7. And the 4 is larger than the 3. Now when that happens, you don't have to borrow. When the numbers on top are larger than the numbers underneath, you don't have to borrow. And that makes them an easier question. So 7 is larger than 1, no borrowing. 5 is larger than 3, and 8 is larger than 2. So no borrowing. None for that one, and none for that one. But if we have a look at a question like this one, we have to start borrowing. So the question is 231 subtract 124. So my question to you is, are the numbers on top always bigger than the numbers underneath? And the answer is no, because this 4 is larger than the one that's on top. Great, so this question has got borrowing in it. First thing, and it's a really, really common mistake, lots of people will say 4 take away 1 equals 3. But that's not the case. Because in this question, I started with 1 and took away 4. Listen to the difference. 1 take away 4 actually equals -3. And 4 take away 1 equals 3. So there's a big difference. That is 4 minus 1 equals 3. And that's different to this. This is 1 minus 4. And when that happens, we have to borrow because the top number is smaller than the bottom number. So when I go to borrow, I need to look at the column directly to the left. So this column here. And I ask myself, can I borrow from the tens column? Can I borrow from here? Is this 3 larger than the 2? And the answer is yes. Okay, so you can't just borrow from the next column. It's got to work. Is this number bigger than the number below it? And it has to be. Otherwise, you can't borrow from there. You would have to borrow from the hundreds column. Okay, let's go back. I can borrow from here. I want to take a 10 from here and pop it into the ones column. I want to take a 10. So instead of that being 30, that's only going to be 20. I'm taking a 10. I'm taking a 10 from 30. I'm taking 110. So this was 3. It was 30. I put a line through it and I put a nice clear 2 up here because this is now 20. And I pop my 10 over here. Now I want you to think, if I had a 1 and I dragged a 10 over, what new number have I made? A 10 and a 1. Have a think. It's 11. That red one and that black one make 11 because that's a 10 and that's a 1. So now I've got 11 subtract 4. I started with 11 and I took 4 away from it. In the tens column now, 2 subtract 2 equals, so I had 2 tens and I took away 2 tens, and that leaves me with how many tens? 0 tens. Really important not to leave that blank. Okay, you need to acknowledge the tens column. You need to recognize that there are 0 tens. If you don't, you're going to throw out your place value. It won't make sense. So you need to recognize that 2 subtract 2 equals 0. Hundreds column. I start with 2 and I take 1 away. 107. That question has got borrowing. Next one. 623. Subtract 518. First question you could ask yourself is this number, where I always start in the top right-hand corner, is this larger than the number below? Is it larger? So we're not saying 8 subtract 3. We're saying 3 take away 8. And that doesn't work. That ends up being -5. So I have to borrow. I can borrow from here. If this number was smaller than this number, I would have to borrow from the hundreds column. I'm going to pinch 110. That's what the borrowing means. You're going to borrow from the column next door. You're borrowing 110. So instead of that being 2 tens, that becomes 110 because you're borrowing. And if you put a 10 next to a 3, if you put a 10 next to a 3, you make 13. So 13 subtract 8 equals 5. I borrowed a 10, I put it with my 3 so that my top number is larger than my bottom number. That's why I borrow. The 3 was smaller than the 8, but now it's not. Now it's 13. 1 subtract 1 equals 0. Please don't forget to acknowledge the tens column. We need to make sure that we have a 0 in there. And then 6 subtract 5 equals 1. Whew. Quick recap, because it's been 11 minutes. Quick recap. These two questions on top have not got any borrowing because each number on top is larger than the number underneath. So that's a nice, easy, neat subtraction. These ones down here have got borrowing, and we borrow when the top number is smaller than the number underneath. So this is a great example here. 1 subtract 4 is not the same as 4 subtract 1. That's different. Start with 1, take away 4. That equals -3. And in an algorithm, you can't do that. You would have to borrow. And we borrowed from here. We pinched 110 and we popped it here. And because we pinched a 10, we changed it from 30 to 20 because we took one. We took one and we put it over here and we made that 7. Good job. I'm glad you're watching. Even if you have someone write you 2 or 3 questions, you can ask for 2 with borrowing and 2 without. If you just keep chipping away at it, you won't forget by the end of the term. Good job.